Does unschooling work? With all this commotion about advantages and disadvantages, you probably have one big question. Does unschooling actually work? In response, I challenge you to tell me how you would measure whether it's working or not. Most people would suggest that comparing standardized test scores between unschoolers and schooled children would allow us to see which method works better. But it's impossible to know all the hidden variables contributing to differences in test results. Specifically, a correlation does not equal causation. Unschoolers doing better or worse than average on a test does not specifically mean that their unschooling life is the cause for the difference in their performance. For example, maybe unschoolers tend to have more intelligent parents who give them a genetic and/or cultural advantage that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the specific method of learning they used. Maybe the same group of unschoolers would be destined for success regardless of their educational choices. If you really insist on comparing standardized test scores, we get the best perspective by looking at SAT scores. While these aren't mandated anywhere, they are taken by many students, and the same test is given nationwide, not state by state. The Homeschooling Legal Defense Association reports that homeschoolers, on average, perform better on every single SAT subject. Specifically, they write, in 2014, homeschoolers scored an average of 567 in critical reading, 521 in mathematics, and 535 in writing. In comparison, the average SAT scores for all 2014 high school seniors were 497 in critical reading, 513 in mathematics, and 487 in writing. It's reference 81. Please note that unschoolers are only 10% of the homeschooling population, and we don't have data specifically on unschoolers. Also keep in mind that SATs are not a very useful way to determine someone's intelligence. Many colleges are moving away from asking for SAT scores on applications. The latest data from fairtest.org lists over 1,000 colleges and universities that don't use SATs as part of their admissions process. Reference 82. If you were to base everything on statistical averages, this would indicate that every student should become a homeschooler. However, there is a severe problem with using statistical averages to make decisions about how individuals should behave. You, as an individual, are a data point of one. I recently read a pair of articles by holistic psychiatrist Dr. Kelly Brogan, where she describes that doctors are using this approach to develop personalized medicine in what she calls N of 1 medicine. She writes, "We are bringing medicine back into the realm of the N of 1, or the study of you. You are not a randomized clinical trial. You are a specific symphony of information." Reference 83. Another quote from Kelly Brogan. "This is N of 1 medicine, where randomized trials, piles of curated medical papers, and statistics are rendered secondary to your personal, individualized experience." Reference 84. "You do not get to live your life a million times and take an average of all your outcomes. You get one life. To make matters more complicated, to compare your own individual performance to statistical averages is also problematic, because the average is a calculation that doesn't actually represent a real individual person." Todd Rose, author of The End of Average, explains part of the issue. "You cannot understand individuals by focusing on group averages. In every field that studies individuals, we found the same thing. There's no such thing as an average cell. There's no such thing as an average genome. There's no such thing as an average cancer. And in what may be the single most important lesson for education, there's no such thing as an average student. And our education system is built on the assumption that there is an average student. Think about it. Most textbooks are designed to be age appropriate, which sounds great, but it really just means they're designed for the average student of that age. Most standardized assessments, like the SAT or IQ test, are explicitly designed based on comparison to a hypothetical average student. Most of our curricular materials prescribe not only as a standardized sequence, but as a standardized time for learning. And we set those sequences and we fix those times based on what we know about learning on average. Reference 85. Comparing standardized test scores also runs into the problem that standardized tests themselves may not be the greatest tool for determining whether someone is receiving a good education. There is far more to one's learning experience than just whether they can solve math problems, recall the definitions of advanced vocabulary words, or remember the dates and locations of famous Civil War battles. We are still yet to develop standardized tests for creativity, self-direction, problem-solving, emotional resilience, kindness, leadership, responsibility, passion, work ethic, physical health, mental health, organization, common sense, money management, culinary skills, tech savviness, decision-making, time management, grit, patience, empathy, honesty, integrity, generosity, or most importantly, happiness. I'm not trying to dismiss your valid concern about whether unschooling is an effective form of education. I simply want to emphasize the challenge in determining what it means to be effective. Not only is it difficult to determine a definition of effective, it's also difficult to do an authentic research study. In a perfect world, you would perform a study involving a large group of students from around the world who live in a variety of geographic locations with different cultural backgrounds and a range of socioeconomic levels. You would then randomly assign students to different groups. One group would receive a conventional education, and one would pursue self-directed learning. Performing a study like this is difficult due to ethical considerations. Can you imagine any parent allowing their child's education to be decided through a randomized study? That's not to say that we don't have any research on unschooling. I just want to prepare you for why the conditions are challenging to perform a perfect study. One approach to studying the outcomes of unschoolers comes from a pivotal research study by Peter Gray and Gina Riley, who published their findings in the Journal of Unschooling and Alternative Learning, reference 86. A summary of the results was also published on Peter Gray's Freedom to Learn blog on psychologytoday.com, reference 87. The study involved interviewing 75 grown unschoolers, which are adults who had been unschooled as youth. The researchers asked a variety of questions to determine how the grown unschoolers were faring as adults, such as whether they ever went to college, whether their career matches their passions, whether they are financially independent, and whether they would choose to unschool their own children. It is important to note that since the survey was voluntary, all the responses came from people who were willing participants. This could potentially introduce a bias into the survey results. For example, it's possible that someone who had a horrible unschooling experience may have been more likely to respond to the survey because they felt very strongly and wanted their opinions to be heard. On the other hand, there may be a tendency for people with bad unschooling experiences to not want to disclose the poor, self-reported outcomes of their life experiences. Thus, there may be a tendency to actually withhold negative opinions. This is not my effort to dismiss all the data gathered in the study. It's merely me doing my best to present an honest case to you. To address the problem of potential bias, Peter and Gina write, "A major limitation of this study, of course, is that the participants are a self-selected sample, not a random sample of grown unschoolers. What the study does unambiguously show, however, is that it is possible to take the unschooling route and then go on to a highly satisfying adult life. For the group who responded to our survey, unschooling appears to have been far more advantageous than disadvantageous in their pursuits of higher education, desired careers, and other meaningful life experiences." Reference 88. The two researchers first broke the unschoolers up into three groups. One group had never attended school, another group had no schooling past 6th grade, and the last group had some schooling past 6th grade. To clarify, they define schooling as either conventional school-at-home style homeschooling or attendance in an actual school. The summary of their data is included in the table at reference 89. You'll notice another potential bias of this study is found in row number 3, gender, which says that far more women completed the survey than men. This does not mean that more women are unschoolers than men. The author suggests the high number of responses from women could possibly be due to the fact that more women read Peter's blog, which is where the questionnaire was posted, or the fact that women are typically more likely to complete online surveys of this kind. You'll also notice that there is no control group in this study, which means we don't get to compare these responses the unschoolers gave to your average public school student. This presents a challenge if one wants to make an argument that all students should be unschooled instead of going to school. However, that is not the purpose of the study. As I mentioned, the conclusion that the researchers came to was that it is possible to take the unschooling route and then go on to have a highly satisfying adult life. Reference 90. Let's dive into some of the details of the study. First, let's address the common question of whether unschoolers attend college or not. There was plenty of data in rows number 4 and number 5 to support the claim that those who wanted to go to college or another form of higher education were able to. Note that in row number 5, a BA refers to a Bachelor of Arts degree from a college. The researchers write, overall, 33 of the 75 participants, which is 44%, had completed a bachelor's degree or were full-time students in a bachelor's program at the time of the survey. Although we did not ask for the names of the colleges attended, some volunteered that information. The named colleges included several state universities like UCLA, University of South Carolina, University of New Mexico, an Ivy League college, Cornell, and a number of small private liberal arts colleges like Bennington, Earlham, Marlborough, Mount Holyoke, or Prescott. Of those who had completed a bachelor's degree, 13 were enrolled in or had completed a postgraduate degree program. Of those who had not enrolled in a bachelor's program, 29 had pursued some other form of higher education, either for vocational training in such realms as the culinary arts, business administration, massage, EMT, practical nursing, and sign language interpretation, or to gain specific other useful or desired skills. Thus, in all, 62, or 83%, of the respondents had pursued some sort of higher education. Reference 91. Clearly, unschoolers do choose to pursue higher education. Again, the key here is that they are choosing to do so. They are not being forced. The research study also asked about the grown unschoolers' experiences as college students to learn whether they felt like they were prepared for their college education. Peter and Gina wrote, the participants reported remarkably little difficulty academically in college. Students who had never previously been in a classroom or read a textbook found themselves getting straight A's and earning honors, both in community college courses and in bachelor's programs. Apparently, the lack of an imposed curriculum had not deprived them of information or skills needed for college success. Most reported themselves to be at an academic advantage compared with their classmates because they were not burned out by previous schooling, had learned as unschoolers to be self-directed and self-responsible, perceived it as their own choice to go to college, and were intent on making the most of what the college had to offer. Reference 92. Their research dug deeper into the grown unschoolers' college experiences, finding that the themes that emerged from the sample as a whole are these. 1. Getting into college was generally not particularly difficult for these unschoolers. 2. The academic adjustment to college was generally quite smooth for them. 3. Most felt advantaged because of their high self-motivation and capacity for self-direction. And 4. The most frequent complaints were about the lack of motivation and intellectual curiosity among their college classmates, the constricted social life of college, and in a few cases, constraints imposed by the curriculum or grading system. Reference 93. Going to college or not going to college is a personal choice, typically based on whether it will help someone in their career. It is not meant for everybody. With the cost of college tuition increasing and many college graduates finding themselves overwhelmed with debt and unable to find jobs, alternatives to college are being created that offer more cost-effective career preparation. One type of alternative is an alternative financial model to attend a conventional university, such as an income share agreement model, or ISA. Under an ISA, instead of taking out a student loan with fixed payments and interest rates, you agree to have a certain percentage of your income go directly to the university for a specific period of time. This creates an incentive for the university to make sure their graduates are finding jobs. Some examples of colleges offering ISAs are Purdue University, Norwich University, Messiah College, University of Utah, and Clarkson University. Reference 94. You can find a curated list of universities offering income share agreements at incomeshareagreements.app. Reference 95. Another type of alternative is a complete alternative to college, with both an alternative learning and financial model. One example of this kind of program is Praxis, which offers a 12-month program that is zero net tuition. The first 6 months is a boot camp that gives you the tools that you would need to go work at a startup company. The second 6 months is a paid internship at a startup, where you are guaranteed to earn enough money to pay off the tuition you spent in the first 6 months. This is a great option for many young people, and they've graduated hundreds of students since launching in 2013. Reference 96. While the individual decision of whether or not you should attend college is beyond the scope of this book, I want to point you to an incredible interview on Blake Boll's Off-Trail Learning podcast about this subject. T.K. Coleman, the education director of Praxis, presents the best arguments against going to college. The consensus that the debate comes to is that the greatest asset that college offers, which is difficult to find outside of college, is the social opportunities. College essentially has a monopoly on the social lives of 18 to 22-year-olds. That being said, TK points out that if someone puts the same effort into creating a social life for themselves that they are putting into college, they can create a rich, meaningful social life without attending college. As TK states, I don't think that all forms of not going to college provide you with a social life. Nothing is easy from the default position of being in a place where it's not easy to make friends. So what you have to do is you have to make some changes. It might be to go to college, or it might be to move to a new city. But either way, you're going to have to get off your butt and get out there and put yourself in an environment where you can meet friends. Reference 97. Regardless of whether one attends college or chooses an alternative path, a more important question is whether they ultimately find employment. Peter Gray and Gina Riley's survey of grown unschoolers found that the majority of the grown unschoolers who responded to the survey were financially independent as adults. That's row number 7 in the table. Keep in mind, the age range here varies, with a median age of 24 years old and a range of 18 to 49. Peter and Gina note, interestingly, that a number of these added that their income was modest and they were financially independent in part because of their frugal lifestyle. Several of them described frugality as a value and said they would far rather do work they enjoyed and found meaningful than other work that would be more lucrative. Reference 98. Also notice that a large number of the respondents pursued careers that matched their childhood interests. That's row number 6. A fascinating finding was that such a large number were pursuing careers in the arts, row number 8. One might think that being an unschooler would be an advantage if you wanted to make a career in the arts, because you'd have more time to work on developing your skills. This may be true, but it's important to remember that being a professional artist isn't just about being skilled at art. It also requires one to figure out how to get people to pay you for your craft. There is no doubt an entrepreneurial aspect of being an artist, which is often forgotten. It may be that unschoolers are able to make a career in the arts not just because of their artistic skill set, but because of the self-directed entrepreneurial attitude they take to creating their desired lives. There is some evidence in Peter Gray and Gina Riley's survey of grown unschoolers that this is the case, with an incredibly high number of unschoolers reporting being self-employed entrepreneurs. Given that my own leap into self-directed learning came when I launched my first business, this made a lot of sense. but I was still blown away by how high the number was. As a comparison, Inc. magazine reports that approximately 14% of adults run their own businesses, reference 99. However, 40 to 60% of unschoolers are reported to run their own businesses. That's row number 9 in the table. Unschoolers that follow unconventional, self-directed career paths are also common. Their study mentions an exemplary individual who describes himself as a 39-year-old self-employed polymath. He had experienced a mix of schooling and unschooling through 10th grade and then left high school for good. He went on to a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering and a life that he refers to as that of a self-employed polymath. He wrote, "As a polymath, what I do now is very much what I have always done. I mostly ignored traditional schooling even when I was forced to go. I do anything and everything that catches my attention. Life is about learning, growing, and sharing your discoveries with others who want to learn and grow too." His list of jobs held over the years includes, but is not limited to, the following: research and development consultant for a medical manufacturing company, clinical hypnotherapist, master practitioner of neurolinguistic programming, director of tutoring services for a community college, wilderness survival, first aid, and bushcraft expert, PADI dive master for scuba diving, martial arts instructor, kung fu judo and jeet kune-do, and author of 2 published children's books, and currently working on a new series of bedtime stories. It's reference 100. The study also included some feedback on what grown unschoolers considered the advantages that their unschooling experiences brought to their careers. Almost all of the respondents, in various ways, wrote about the freedom and independence that unschooling gave them, and the time it gave them to discover and pursue their own interests. 70% of them also said, in one way or another, that the experience enabled them to develop as highly self-motivated, self-directed individuals. Many also wrote about the learning opportunities that would not have been available if they had been in school, about their relatively seamless transition to adult life, and about the healthier, age-mixed social life they experienced out of school contrasted with what they would have experienced in school. Reference 100. Thanks to Peter Gray and Gina Riley's research, we now have some published evidence that unschoolers can grow into successful adult lives. Self-directed learning advocate Blake Bowles also recently launched a website, grownunschoolers.com, which features narrative profiles of adults who grew up unschooling and have careers in arts, science, technology, trades, music, and more. Reference 101. You can even filter to read the stories of those who attended college and those who did not to compare their outcomes. It's a great resource to put a face to the mysterious lives of unschoolers. At this stage, you may be sold on the idea of unschooling as a viable path for yourself, but you may be wondering, how do I start?